Let's see. Greetings, good morning. Well, this morning I want to talk about transferring expertise and knowledge of senior employees that you have before they retire. Because I hear this over and over again that in many industries, this is a serious problem, especially if the expertise runs deep, right? So, of course, when we hire people, we want them to bring appropriate knowledge with them so that we have to train them as little as possible. But we all know that it's almost like a driver's license. It allows you to actually drive, but there is still so much knowledge that they need that's unique to your company, so much expertise that your senior people have gathered that again there is just so much, the gap is so big. And then there's another problem that comes along with that, that the learning styles of junior employees may be vastly different than the learning styles and therefore also the teaching styles of the senior staff. There's a generational gap to bridge. And then furthermore, we may not always get all the talent that we want. We may have to hire some people who have maybe a little less knowledge than we wish they had, and we have to just deal with that. And also, the list goes on and on. You may actually hire for cultural fit before you hire for skills. And actually, I think that's smart, because if you have someone who has a lot of knowledge but who doesn't fit your culture, the list of problems that you will have is just about almost endless. So, okay, I'd like to give you some concrete things to do and take away from this live broadcast. And so to solve these issues, it's not sufficient, I don't think, to just keep doing the traditional things that we have been doing, which is to basically pair up, a junior person with your senior person, take them under the wings and mentor them up and, train them. That's good, but there's several issues with that. Number one, if you don't have the junior employee yet, that is supposed to replace the senior person, maybe you don't have the money, to have them both on at the same time, or traditionally maybe there's a 2-week overlap. Well, if there's a 2-week overlap, that's not a lot of time to get all that knowledge from one brain into the other. But also, what happens if that person leaves? So that's where I've created a concept called brilliance mining, and the concept is really quite simple. And then I'll show you, how we actually do this, and there's several scenarios I want to make you aware of. So the overall principle is this: there is knowledge that the senior staff has in their brain. And by the way, this also applies to business owners when they maybe want to lean out of their business a bit more, So, anyways, there's an expert who has knowledge in their brain, and there's two types of knowledge: the knowledge they have, and then there's the knowledge they use automatically. That's unconscious competence. That second part is the hardest to actually get at and teach. But okay, let's park that for the moment and get back to the overall idea that knowledge has to be transferred from one person's brain to another. Traditionally, we do that from person to person, which is great, but again, has its flaws. But what if we actually capture that in an organized manner, and then we put it into a training system? Now, that doesn't abolish all, one-on-one mentoring, but it makes sure it could act as the backbone of your training. So that means that you can capture a lot more knowledge and make it immortal, so you can keep it forever. And if someone leaves, it's not as big a deal. And if the overlap between a senior employee and a more junior employee is either short or non-existent, again, that's not a big deal then. So with that, you can stop losing, hair or growing gray hair over this. And at the same time, it actually helps you scale. So let me show you 4 different scenarios. Let me see what I can do this here. All right. So first of all, let me give you a little nomenclature, namely the word brilliance. What does that mean? Basically means knowledge, expertise, even wisdom that someone has in their brain. And again, there's 2 parts to it. The part that person knows they have, and then the other part, which is at least as valuable, is the part that they just do automatically. For example, I'm a recovering scientist myself, so I had this colleague Eric, and we were developing radio frequency based detectors, and we were detecting things like landmines or explosives in luggage, and the list goes on and on. But Eric was amazing at troubleshooting when that equipment picked up not the tiny little signals that we wanted, but the much bigger signals that you often find in the environment. So troubleshooting basically of this RF equipment. And he had something like a 6th or 7th or 8th sense for how to do that. And he was also really great at inventing new circuits, but he barely ever had time to really do that because everyone was always saying, Eric, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And Eric solved so many, he saved our bacon so many times. It's unbelievable, right? But the thing is, when Eric wasn't there, let's say he was sick, he was on vacation, well, we always begged him, don't go on vacation, we need you. Anyway, but when Eric retires, what happens? So that's what I'm talking about. So there's the things that Eric could readily explain, but how do you explain his 6th, 7th, or 8th sense? Well, so meet brilliance mining. It has 3 steps. There's the mapping, where we find out, okay, what sort of knowledge is there actually that needs to be transferred? Then there's the extraction. And even though it sounds like there might be a knife involved, I promise you this is not the case. And then there's the replication. This is where you actually put that captured knowledge into motion, where you actually are transferring it to other people, where you use it to grow and scale your business. And of course, also, as we're talking about here, you make sure that succession goes smoothly. So here are the 4 scenarios. It always starts with knowledge in the brain. One scenario is to create some videos. And generally, I would encourage you to make those short and to maybe lay out a little bit beforehand, that's in the mapping step. What videos do you need to create to cover a particular area? Then from there, you can get into transcripts, make transcripts from these videos, and then you can summarize what was talked about in the form of slides, and basically then make them visual. So now you have videos and slides, and then you can extract out of the slides. The slides basically have already the key points, so you can, if you imagine a page, let's say a WordPress page, right? You can create what I'm getting at is you can create a training portal. So each lesson has a page that has a title on it, then it has a video on it, then it has maybe slides underneath, and these slides are created from what the person said in the video. And then you can pair it even with either a quiz or a brief assignment if you want to, but that's all optional. But the cool thing is, as soon as you have the videos, you already have something that you can use. And then all these other steps, your transcript, slides, key points, maybe quizzes, maybe assignments, they can all be done over time. You see, you can, what I call a minimum viable product, you can create that pretty quickly. Now let's go to another scenario. This scenario often is used when the expertise that needs to be transferred is more complex. So for example, the scenario with Eric would probably fall into this. So that involves having conversations with Eric, more than one, and to gather out of his head, all the different things. And so let's say if I were to work with Eric on capturing his expertise about troubleshooting, I would ask him about different scenarios. How did you do that? How did you do this one? How did you do that one? And start to see the red thread that runs through these different scenarios and get to the bottom of how does the seventh sense actually work? And then I find it often useful to actually capture that on slides and break down the information. So it's an extraction and distilling down process. So again, within just even a few sessions, you have at least some of Eric's knowledge distilled down and captured. So, or I should say the other way around, captured and then distilled down. And what it takes for someone to do that is, that's the process of brilliance mining, really, is to be curious and not have the fear to ask another question that may make you look stupid, because you may ask the occasionally stupid question, but it's pretty rare. What in actuality you are doing is you finding things that the person is doing unconsciously. That's you digging into that unconscious competence, which comes from many years of doing things. So in fact, I often compare that to marbles. Marbles have all these different colors. I have some cool ones here somewhere. Actually, right here. Okay. See these marbles here? Well, they have unique colors, right? And that's representative of expertise and experience that you can't look up anywhere. Because let's say, here I have one that has orange and white and blue. And so that could represent, knowledge that you have found at the interface of 3 different fields. So, let's say RF and hardware and landmine detection, or you name it. It could be at the interface of, let's say, electrical engineering and architecture and the space that you serve. For example, I know of a company that does a lot of public works, and they say, everything that we do is pretty much hidden under in a wall or underground. So there's, as you can see, there's like 3 different areas that come together to form this secret sauce. So conversationally, you can extract that, but it takes a special kind of person to do that. And the person must not know too much about it already, or they're not going to ask enough questions. So the third part is you can go from the brain to writing articles. So I worked, for example, with a medical doctor, and he had written something like 60 or 70 articles. But I tell you, those articles were not easy reads. And so what we had to do is distill these articles down into something that can be taught to people bite by bite. In this case, it was a program, or is a program, to beat insulin resistance. And so we had to, make the more medical jargon approachable. We had to break it down. We had to, make it into a bite by bite flow where you can, not feel, the learner doesn't feel like they're drinking out of a fire hose, but more like a garden hose, or, like one of those trickling water thingies. So, and And you always, of course, have to keep the learner in mind and think about, okay, I'm going to not teach 60-year-olds or 70-year-olds, but I'm going to maybe teach 30-year-olds or 20-year-olds or 40-year-olds, and put yourself in the shoes of the recipient and see how would they actually be excited to learn what you want to teach them, so it becomes fun and effective instead of dreadful and not effective. So in this case, we actually, once we had slides, we recorded videos of a fun panel of 4 people, and we talked about the content more conversationally. The last scenario I want to share with you is when you might be working by yourself, which can be done up to a point. So at a certain point, you will need others. But here's how you can go as far as possible with working on your own. Basically, you got to get good at observing what you do and then collecting those, what I call brilliance nuggets, someplace. For example, I use an app called Notion, and you can tag the information there, little nugget by little nugget, and you can start to assemble it. Now, that is some work to do, and it's, of course, more convenient to actually have someone help you do that. And it's not only more convenient, but more effective. But all of those scenarios are actually things that I teach. That is part of what I do. This is a big part of what I do. And the other part is I actually work with companies, high expertise companies usually, that on brilliance mining. And that means that, it's a very close relationship where we decide which of those scenarios is the best for you at the moment. And it's always important to get there as quickly as possible, to put that knowledge, into a system where it can be used, and put it into play as quickly as possible so you get an ROI very quickly. And that applies whether you do it by yourself or whether, you do it with someone. I have a Q&A coming up. I'm going to put the link underneath this live broadcast. And basically, this is a great opportunity for you to ask some questions and, learn more about it. So I look forward to it. I hope this is helpful to you, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.